Hello and welcome to the final evening of the 2021 Aspen Ideas Festival. I'm Zinklea Samoa, host and correspondent at Now This News and your host of this year's festival. We've had 4.5 days of thought-provoking dialogue, astounding insights, and the kinds of conversations that offer a new perspective on the world. We've covered dozens upon dozens of topics, from the microscopic to the cosmic, from the personal to the political, and from historical into the far-flung future. Along the way, we've spelled out problems and offered possibilities. But there are no simple answers to the challenges we face. We can't just think our way through. We have to act on what we know. We have one final session, which begins in just a moment. Aspen Ideas Festival is generously underwritten by Allstate, IBM, MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth, Mount Sinai, PayPal, Walton Family Foundation, Verizon, and YouTube. Also, thanks to Prudential and the Rise Fund. We're going on a mission. Diana Trujillo, flight director of the Perseverance rover, talks with the Atlantic's Marina Corin about what the rover has found, about her own trajectory in aerospace, and about her quest to bring more women into science and engineering. She'll also share her thoughts about what fuels humanity's need to explore.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Aspen Ideas Festival. I'm Marina Corin. I'm a staff writer at The Atlantic, where I cover space exploration. I'm glad to be here today in conversation with Diana Trujillo, an engineer at NASA and a member of the team behind NASA's newest mission to Mars, the Perseverance rover. The rover arrived on the surface of Mars in February with a very exciting task: to look for signs of ancient fossilized life in the soil. So I'm very excited to talk to Diana and about the mission and her experience at NASA. So hi, Diana, how are you?
Hi, thank you for having me.
Where are you beaming in from today?
So I am in California. I am in Pasadena, where NASA JPL is located. And yeah.
Do you wish you were on Mars?
Of course, I wish I were on Mars. But, it's kind of interesting that you asked me that question because, we see pictures of Mars every day. And at some point, you can tell the difference in between, are you on Mars yourself? Because you're seeing it just as the rover is seeing it. And at the same time, you're tracking with the time that is happening on Mars or the execution of what the rover is doing. So it's kind of, you kind of have two watches, whatever is happening on Mars and whatever is happening on Earth for your normal life.
Yeah, and kind of check the weather forecasts for both planets a little bit.
You kind of do, actually, because then you have to figure out if you have problems with calm or if you're going to have problems with, any dust devil storms that might happen or might come by that you need to worry about the optics. So yeah, so we certainly also think about weather on Mars.
So you led the team that developed the Perseverance rover's robotic arm, and this is an arm that's literally doing some heavy lifting, drilling into soil, collecting soil for sample tubes for future missions to come by and bring back home, looking around for trying to answer this very big question. How do you approach building a piece of hardware as complex as that?
So I have done several jobs. Thankfully, I feel like I'm very blessed with the Perseverance mission, and the same way with Curiosity. With the Perseverance mission, I was deputy phase lead for the robotic arm science, which what that means, which is related to your question, is really to come up with the hardware comes in, the software comes in, and now the job of my team was to ensure that when the hardware comes in and the software is now installed, and you of course have electrically integrated everything, that the thing that you have in front of it is doing the thing that you promised you were going to do. So to your question as to how do we approach that, is quite interesting, and I really enjoy it because you need to kind of transport yourself into the future and say, okay, when we are on Sol, meaning the day off on Mars, so day Sol the same. So when you are on Sol 30 and we want to use the robotic arm, how will we use it? I will use it this way, that way, and the other. And then now look back and say, okay, given where I am now and the pieces that are still coming slowly, how do we actually test this piece of hardware? How do we demonstrate that it's doing the right thing? And how do we convince ourselves that although we're testing it on Earth, that the change in temperature on Mars, the change on gravity on Mars, the additional things that happen on the atmosphere and on the terrain where you are not going to give us false positives that it work on Earth, but it might not work on Mars. So you're kind of dabbling between two planets, understanding the differences, recognizing your own limitations, and then figuring out or try to extrapolate how we will end up using it on the surface eventually.
And then what is that experience like once the rover is on Mars? What does your average day look like once you're actually doing the thing that you set out to do?
It's quite interesting and very, for me, very exciting because I like, high pressure, high gain situations where, you're kind of like putting everything out there, hoping that it's going to work, but you really don't know until you actually try it. And so it's a very interesting and exciting experience to be able to do a lot of firsts. First time we install, first time we touch the surface, first time we actually collect the sample, first time we take that image, and see that those first times, the similarities of how those first times actually trace back to a year and a half ago. We saw that exact same behavior on the surface on Earth. Now we're seeing it on Mars. So it's good and bad things, right? Good things because you're like, yes, we got it right. Bad because it's like, wait, we did not think about that. And exciting because now it's like, well, on the fly, tactically turn it around in the next 24 hours and respond to the thing that you just saw happen that you didn't actually foresee happening. So you're playing this catch-up game constantly in where you kind of have to be very flexible and receptive to a lot of information that you knew that you might have missed, information that you knew that happened exactly, and information that you never accounted for. And now you need to triage it and make it work.
And do you think that Perseverance is going to find compelling evidence of something in the surface on its time there, and we don't have to wait for those samples to come back to Earth however many years down the road?
Yeah, so Perseverance's objective is to find if at some point on the surface of Mars in the past, there was life. We're not, of course, looking for life like you and I. We're looking for life, microbial life that happened in the past. And so when you ask me, do I think that we're going to find it? I mean, that's the whole thing. Why we exist on the surface of Mars right now with the Perseverance mission to find it. So are we doing everything that we can? Absolutely, yes. Now, will we be able to do all the experiments that we need to the sample that we're going to find? The answer is no, because we only have 7 instruments that we can take. The whole point is to actually identify it, convince ourselves that it is the right spot, take the sample, which is as big as a pencil. So we have several sample tubes, all of them as big as a pencil, and then capture and say, okay, next mission, Mars sample return, come pick it up because we know we found it. Now is Earth, do all the experiments that you think you can do, because I'm sure that there's a million experiments that people will want to do on it.
So you've had a very interesting journey to this point in your career at NASA. And this is a story that you've told often. You grew up in Colombia, you moved to the United States when you were only 17, learned English. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and what led you then to dive into aerospace engineering and decide that you wanted to do that?
Sure. So, so when I came to the US, I knew very little English, almost nothing, and then had very little money on my pocket. And I think that, I went from a situation where it was very much survival mode. What am I going to do today? Where am I going to eat? Where am I going to sleep? Type of situation, to a situation where I realized that education, like, a lot of our parents tells us that, right? It's like, hey, education is the gateway to your future, and you still manage to sometimes doubt that. In my case, it's not that I was doubting the fact that it was education. It was the fact that education is expensive. And if I was going to go pay for my education, I needed to go figure out how I was going to support it financially. But once I actually got into my track of learning English, and then on my track to actually realize that I could do it, that I could manage all the balls that I was just juggling with the fact that it was work and school and homework and more work to pay for it all. At that point, I just thought, okay, well, I have a possibility of going from survival mode to actually choosing. And then once I got into the position where I could choose, now the question was, choose what? And how? And what impact do you want to do in history, really, or in humanity in general? And I think I took it that far because, I saw all the women in my family where they had to put to the side what they wanted to do. A lot of the cases because of a lack of financial freedom, because they were tied to their significant other who was the provider, and not necessarily because they weren't able to actually do it themselves. It's because the way that it was structured was, he is the one, in this case, he, for the husbands of my grandpa, then my grandma, my great grandma, and my mom are the ones providing, what you can do, and also the ones saying you can't do that. So in my case, it was just the fact that I thought, well, I feel like I need to aim high for them, aim high on honor of what they have done, and at the same time aim high because if I don't break the cycle in my own end, if I don't think that I can do a little bit more, then I'm not really paying forward what they did for me. But so anyways, for me then after that, it was just more of a, learning about the fact that space is always a place, or the sky really is always a place where you look at up at the sky, you look at the stars and you think everything just works great. Like nobody's fighting, nobody's complaining, nobody's like trying to figure out who's better than the other one. It's not about that. And there's giant planets, right? And so if all of that works, how does it work? Because clearly we don't know. And that's where it started for me. That's where it hooked me up into space.
And so for Perseverance's arrival on Mars, you hosted a Spanish language live commentary for NASA. I'm wondering what advice you would give to any future aerospace engineers who might have been watching that.
Oh, I love your question. So I did that for you, will be my comment to them. I did that for you because, and I don't know if it was something that was going to help you or not, but I put myself on their shoes. I didn't have the opportunity of somebody to tell me early in my life, you can do this. Not only you can do this, is you can dream of it. Allow yourself to dream of going to space. Allow yourself to go to explore and learn more. My idea was three things, actually. One of them was, I wanted to set that environment by having those moments that I didn't have, and hopefully enabling those for the next generation, and really to the current generation that still wants to do it, that didn't do it. They still have the time, right? And so it was the moment of, my abuela, like I wanted my grandma, who had a very strong presence on my life, to come in and be like, mija, pay attention. And I had that scene of like me looking up, and she's like, mira, she can do it. Why are you not doing that? And it's just like, what? Yes, let me look. And that moment, right, where you have somebody else in your family that is like, you can do it. And it just takes 1 second for somebody that is in your family to tell you that, and for your perspective to change. I also wanted my parents, my mom, my dad, to come in to me and like come and say, hey, did you watch that? Are you watching? Even if it was like, just pay attention, or just read, or look at all the other people that are on the screen. You can be one of them, and help me see that if they thought that I could, I certainly should consider it. And then the last thing for me was to have that opportunity to see somebody else and be like, wow, like they're doing that. I want that one. I want to do that job, or that job, or that job, or the person that's talking, or the person that's sitting on the back. And, you inevitably make those connections to the person, even from like her hair is long, or she's a girl, or like she speaks Spanish, like all of those connections, those humans connections that we make when we see somebody else doing the thing that we want to do, but sometimes we don't dare to do it. I wanted just to at least make a little crack on that ceiling and say that it is out there and it's your choice.
That's really wonderful. I'd like to end with a question about robotic exploration of Mars in general, whether that's Perseverance, Curiosity, Ingenuity, which is the cutest little helicopter on Mars ever. Because these machines are kind of like extensions of ourselves. They're extensions of the people that deploy them. And in the grandest sense, they're extensions of humankind. And with you leading the team behind the robotic arm, what does it mean for you to kind of be able to reach out and do the exploring of Mars in that way?
I love your question, and I love the fact that you bring ingenuity and deployment, because I don't know if you knew this, but I happen to have been the flight director on the day that we deploy Ingenuity on the surface of Mars. So I can tell you exactly what it means, that exact thing. Totally stressful, right? Like you walk in and you're about to do that thing that you have prepared for many, 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 many months and years to make it happen. You have one shot. And you're not doing it for you. You're not doing it for the team that is in front of you. You're doing it for planet Earth. And planet Earth is actually doing it, and it's not even you. You're not even on the picture, right? And so it is a tremendous honor to be the person that gets to be on that room where you evaluate and make the right decisions, hopefully the right decisions. Thankfully, it went really well. When you make the right calls across all that timeline at the right instances, because there's a lot at stake. If we don't deploy it correctly, it's going to break. If we do the autonomous driving that we were going to do, we're going to drag it. If it doesn't cut the power that we had, then it's going to not survive overnight. Like lots of things, right? And so I just feel like, I have the biggest honor, which is to show up to work and know that I'm not only doing a good job, that I must do a good job, that I must do it with excellence and integrity, because I am representing not me. I am representing what humanity can actually do when we push the envelope, and remind us really that when we do it well, it reminds us that we together can do a lot, right? In the middle of the pandemic, everything that we did, I hope that it reminded people that nothing can really stop us if we really work together and we put everything to the side that is personal and instead focus on a bigger goal than just me.
Okay, I think that's a really great note to end on. Deanna, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I really appreciate it.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Although Ideas Festival friend and frequent participant Gwen Ifill died in 2016, we remember her for her important contribution to the American discourse.
I struggle, not with my patriotism or my love of the country, but to figure out how can we get over the humps, not the conversations, not the round tables, but how do we see each other? How do we begin to see ourselves and then see each other?
After her passing, the Ifill Scholars Program was established to bring to the Ideas Festival young journalists who help to protect our democracy while seeking truth.
I am absolutely thrilled to be moderating this conversation for two reasons. Firstly, as an anthropologist, some of you may earlier have heard me talk about my new book, Anthrovision, this one here. I'm fascinated by the really fundamental changes that are going on right now in terms of how we see money, and also by the fact that there's really nothing new under the sun, and some of this is actually going back to the future rather than being quite so forward-looking. But as a journalist, I am thrilled to talk about cryptocurrency because for us at the Financial Times, crypto is a bit like the Kim Kardashian of the financial journalism world. It's a story that we know if we put it on the front page, we will get everyone reading, loads of clicks, and really, really strong passions. Because some people absolutely love it, some people absolutely hate it. And in just the last few weeks, looking back at the headlines, we've had a whole series of best of times and worst of times stories about cryptocurrencies. Worst of times, China's clamped down on the Bitcoin miners, sending the price crashing. We've had the UK and Japanese in just the last couple of days clamp down on Binance, I don't know how you pronounce that. We've had people like Warren Buffett say he thinks the whole thing is pointless. I think he was talking about Bitcoin. We've had outflows, apparently, from Ethereum funds, and we've had wild price volatility, partly sparked by people like Elon Musk complaining about the environmental impact of all this. What took him so long to notice, one may ask. On the best of times, though, we've also had groups like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Fidelity, lots of mainstream players jumping in. We've got Jim Cramer coming out just yesterday saying he loves Ethereum and wants to buy lots of it. And we've got, most importantly, the central banks themselves saying that they want to get involved in this through central bank digital currencies. So, Kim Kardashian of the financial world.
Not me.
Let me quickly start, before I start asking you questions, by asking the audience, how many of you in the room own some kind of Bitcoin, Ethereum, or cryptocurrency? Okay.
Pretty good number.
Pretty good number, yeah. Let age be no barrier. How many of you in the room think it's a really exciting, positive development? And how many of you think it's actually just a gigantic Ponzi scheme dreamt up to distract your kids? Okay, is it a Ponzi scheme? You've actually got more supporters in the room than detractors.
It's a Ponzi scheme to the extent that the Federal Reserve notes are Ponzi schemes. Cryptocurrency is essentially built on top of a new kind of database technology. It's a database technology that enables many different independent actors to all hold the data, inspect the data, and agree on exactly what happened and when it happened with respect to transactions on this globally shared ledger. And so what that does is it's basically an invention of digital scarcity. And so I can give Jillian an MP3 song, and I can give that same song to many people in the audience, and there is no real digital scarcity there. But on this new kind of database technology, we can create digitally scarce assets. So it's a new kind of trust foundation for the planet. We've lived for millennia using subjective trust systems that are based on centralized institutions that imbue transactions and relationships with trust. And we're living in a world where there is loss of trust in those centralized institutions, and things are very complicated. Technology is very complex, and it is possible to wield those centralized systems in ways that don't serve the general population.
So basically, you work through scarcity of asset, just like gold,
Yep.
unlike fiat currency, and the trust is not vertical in that you're trusting into a central bank or an authority figure. You're trusting each other, and you're trusting the computing technology.
Yeah. So at the foundation of this new paradigm is horizontal trust. It's on Ethereum 1, it's around 8,000. Ethereum version 1.0, it's about 8,000 validators running the system right now. They share their resources and process transactions, and they get paid for that. Bitcoin's about the same size in terms of number of validators. Ethereum 2 is already started, and we're at around 150,000 validators. And the two are going to merge soon. I'm sure we'll be able to talk about that. But essentially, this base layer is a new trust foundation for the planet. It enables us to build systems going forward with automated and objective trust rather than the subjective trust that we've built on forever.
I'm going to ask you in a minute just to quickly define the difference briefly between Bitcoin and Ethereum, or Dogecoin, or the other coins out there. Apparently someone's dreaming up hamster coin right now. But before I do that, though, I'd like to ask you, in terms of why people should trust anybody else on the internet or trust the computing system, what do you say to people who say, how do we manage to trust that at all? Because it seems to me one of the problems with cryptocurrencies is that to understand it, you have to have knowledge of three things which are almost never taught together. You need to understand economics, you need to understand cryptography and computer science, and you need to understand game theory, because game theory appears to underpin essentially the trust. Sure. And I don't know if anyone in the room's got a training in all three of those, but I certainly don't. So tell us why we should trust any part of this system.
So with any complicated technology like automotive technology, pharmaceutical technology, they're always experts, and they have their own tribality, and they have their own vocabulary. And in the global financial system, there is also the same sort of situation. And The difference between the current global financial system and the proposed decentralized financial system that is being built right now on this new trust layer is that the current global financial system is largely built in closed source software, in back rooms. It's basically a bunch of siloed systems and effectively a private infrastructure. And some of it is made public, certainly, but in the open source, decentralized financial system that's being built, everything is open. It's all open source. There are hordes of very smart people who understand those technologies who are constantly poring over these systems and making them better and fixing bugs when they arise. It's essentially like what the web technology and the internet technology did for access to information around the world, and the ability to publish information, the ability to engage in or build e-commerce or social networking. It's the democratization of finance. And so the world of creators, the world of entrepreneurs are now focused on building decentralized finance, which will be very fluid and global.
So how, because you're second after Bitcoin, that's how it's usually seen. I'm sure you regard yourself as first.
In only one measure.
What?
In only one measure.
What measure?
Two measures. First, Bitcoin came first.
Right.
And second, it has the largest monetary base. But I'd be happy to explain the difference when you're ready.
Okay. Well, tell us briefly, because I've got so much I want to cover, but tell us briefly how Ethereum is different from Bitcoin or Dogecoin. Dogecoin. Yeah. As I said, I'm on a learning journey too.
That's how Elon prefers to.
Okay, Dogecoin, as said by Elon Musk.
So Bitcoin was invented based on a couple of decades of explorations, really. It was invented or released into the world in 2008, start of 2009, and it was essentially this new trust foundation applied to a very narrow use case, the issuance of a token that was intended to represent money. In my opinion, the nomenclature cryptocurrency has caused the industry to suffer very much because it's not a good currency in a couple of respects of currency. It is a good growing store of value, and so I like to think about it as basically an NFT, a big, incredibly valuable, conceptual, non-fungible token. And it is fractionated so that many people in the world can own this concept, essentially. And like a valuable piece of art, it will potentially grow in value. And it's very similar to gold in that respect, where gold is fractionated and many people in the world own some gold and treat it as a store of value. So very narrow financial use case. And that it's been easy to explain to early adopters and financial institutions. It's a store of value. Ethereum is the next generation, or a foundation for the next generation decentralized web. You can build any sort of application, including many applications in decentralized finance on it. And so the ecosystem of Ethereum developers is enormous. It's much larger than any other ecosystem in the cryptocurrency space. And Bitcoin has a very small ecosystem of developers.
Well, some people would say, and I think with some reason, that Bitcoin may end up looking like the MySpace of the social media world, and you are aspiring to be the Facebook, which is not always
We are not aspiring to be the Facebook.
I meant in terms of market positioning. I'm sure you don't want to be associated
We're
with...
aspiring to be the foundation of the decentralized web.
So are you trying to be the Google of cryptocurrencies? Is that what consensus is?
Google is built on the web, and we're aspiring to be, Ethereum is aspiring to be the foundation of the decentralized web. It's a platform for running applications.
So you're aspiring to be, in a sense, a Google plus Amazon Web Services plus...
One way to think of Ethereum is as a global, open super app. So the same way that there are certain super apps, especially in China, where you can do all the things that you want to do, rent a car, pay your bills, etc. What's happening right now is that on this permissionless platform, many people around the world, many companies around the world are building applications. And unlike building applications and delivering them through the Apple Store, the Google Play Store, or on Facebook or on LinkedIn even, there's virtually no platform risk.
Right.
Apple isn't going to, or Ethereum can't bump people's applications off the network. And in my opinion, reducing platform risk on the planet is a very important thing to do right now, because platform power is wielded in concerning ways.
So you present yourself as a decentralized system that cannot be controlled by any one government or any one tech giant. Is that fair?
So there are ways of attacking the system and reducing the interest in building out the system or using the system. If you're a very well-resourced actor and you decide that you don't want that system to have impact on your nation state, China, for instance, potentially, you can forbid it. You can make it illegal.
So China can bring you down?
No, China can bring Ethereum down inside of China. And in order to do that, they kind of have to shut down the internet there or drastically reduce the functionality of certain aspects of the internet. So you could do that in America, but you'd have to really shut down the internet and you'd have to suspend free speech. And so I'm not worried that that's going to happen.
Well, that's a debatable point at some point.
Currently, I'm not worried.
Okay. Well, we can go that another time. But just to quickly pick on this point, though, about decentralization, because one of the really important things that's happening right now to you is you're going from crypto 1.0 to 2.0 in terms of having a system where...
So Ethereum 1.0 to 2.0? Yeah.
In that you're going from proof of work to proof of stake.
And proof of work is the very energy consumptive version.
Can you just very briefly, because I mean we're dealing with an audience that's probably both kindergarten and PhD here today. I'm about sort of grade 2 right now, second grade. But you're going from a system where people actually own the currency and create the currency by mining it through intensive energy consumption and computer systems into one where they just have to use the computers to prove they own a piece. Is that right?
Yep, well said. So backing up a little bit, we have built the early stages of a new trust foundation for the planet. The trust characteristic derives from massive decentralization. If you can get hundreds of thousands of independent actors running nodes on the network and validating transactions on the network, then it is enormously difficult to cheat the system, basically. So you have to get to all the different actors if you want to change a historic entry in this database. One of Bitcoin's central inventions was to require miners to do lots of computations to solve a puzzle, to have the right to propose the next state of the system, to basically package up a whole bunch of transactions in a block and link that block to the history of blocks. And as the history gets deeper and deeper, it becomes virtually impossible to change or repudiate the history of the system. Unfortunately, it has turned into a hardware and energy arms race. And in order to mine a Bitcoin block, the world is burning a lot of electricity. In order to mine an Ethereum block, the world is burning a bunch of electricity, not nearly as much as for Bitcoin. We have worked from the start of the Ethereum project on something called proof of stake, which replaces the specialized hardware and the consumptive nature, the energy consumptive nature of the system with essentially an economic bond. So you take some Ether, you put it in a program on the Ethereum network, and then you are probabilistically selected to process the next block. And there's a lot of randomness in there so that you don't, out of 150,000 validators, you don't know when you're going to be selected, and there's redundancy in selection. But basically, it is a much more decentralized system. It is much fairer because there are no efficiencies of scale. I can run one validator, and if you're running 10,000 in your warehouse, you don't have any
Right.
non-linear advantage. And it's a system that has low barrier to entry. So anyone can participate in it, and it 99.999 something percent more energy efficient.
What about the criminal aspect of it, which often is seen as being one of the reasons why regulators might want to shut it down? Does it worry you that criminals might be using this, that people can use it for ransomware and things like that? Or is that, you'd say that's just Bitcoin?
Yeah, so ransomware is an unfortunate problem, but there have been ransoms and kidnapping and setting up companies to receive ransom payments for a long time. So the US dollar is used in lots of criminal activities. And any new technology can be used on the fringes for some nefarious acts, but this is a revolution in how we build trust systems and financial systems, and many systems architected on top of those things, and so we should not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right. Well, before I go to, I think we have time for a few questions in just a moment. Before I do, though, what about central banks? Because, you know, I've spent a lot of time talking to central banks in the last couple of years about this, and they've moved from a position of absolute horror and scorn to very suddenly, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, what I call the Basel tribe, the group of central bank governors around the BIS in Basel, have suddenly, I wouldn't say come behind it, but indicated that they're not only running their own innovation centers, but they are planning, in some cases, to issue central bank digital currencies, which are not the same as Bitcoin, but they're moving into this space. So 2 questions. Are you worried that they're basically going to displace you and disintermediate you? Because if the Fed were to issue a digital currency, how on earth would you possibly compete with that? And are you in any way seeing a potential to try and collaborate with them instead, and for those, you know, dusty old central bank governors to start working with the cool kids on the block like you?
So we've worked with the Monetary Authority of Singapore, with the South African Reserve Bank. Currently, we're working with the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, Bank of Thailand. PBOC is in the mix on a regional experiment. The BIS is overseeing a lot of that work. So we are very happy to facilitate the use of the technology for those kinds of institutions. We've had talks with the Fed. It'll be interesting how these systems are rolled out. So China's currently ahead of the pack. I'm not so worried about China rolling out their digital currency system early. Part of their interest is similar to the One Belt, One Road initiative, where they entice partners to get into their system. But ultimately, the rule of law is going to win in this situation, and the United States is going to be just fine from a reserve currency perspective. The United States has a project going on, and very recently, Randall Quarles, who I think he's the chairman of
he's in charge of
the
FSB,
Financial Stability Board, and he's a board member at the Fed. He indicated that he wasn't concerned about stablecoins. So stablecoins are a monetary construct on Ethereum that basically either represents a digital asset in a bank, one-to-one to the dollar, or there are mechanisms where they're over-collateralized in different ways. And so it's nice. So that's a cryptocurrency that is a stable unit of account, which is really valuable. He indicated essentially that, hey, we shouldn't be worried about these stable coins. Private organizations have been issuing money since the start of the Federal Reserve. That's how money gets created. Private commercial banks are essentially given permission based on reserve ratios to issue new money into the world. And so there doesn't seem to be a philosophical concern about having these systems out in the world. And if some of them are competitive, if some of them have different capabilities, then that's just choice, that's optionality.
I suspect there may not be a philosophical problem, there may be a political and power problem, because I don't think anywhere in history a group of elites who control things have said, yes, we're dying to give power to the crowd.
Sure, but this technology is very aligned with free market capitalism. It's very aligned with liberal democratic philosophy. And so at its base, it is a very free market capitalistic. And you can also create these governance systems that are basically collectives, and they can issue their own currency and make proposals and enact proposals according to whatever philosophy they prefer. And so you can have a socialist-looking collective or any color on the spectrum.
Right, a socialist Ethereum coin. That'll be interesting. We have time, I think, for one question, maybe two, if anyone's got a question they'd like to ask. If not, I would like to ask about Elon Musk.
Oh.
Is he a friend or foe?
I've never met him. I think he's a brilliant individual doing great things for humanity. And unfortunately, he tends to use his platform sometimes in perhaps slightly irresponsible ways. And so I think he should be much more careful about things he says, because they can have real impact on people's lives.
And two other quick questions. I've got barely any time. Do you own any fiat currency? Or is all your money in Ethereum these days, or all your assets?
So there's a few dollars in my wallet, and a couple of credit cards, and I have a little bit of money in the bank, yeah.
Right. And I guess the other question I'm curious about is, so much of your excitement about this is based on an assumption that fiat currencies are going to die. You often talk about...
I didn't say that. I never said that.
Okay, well, where do you see fiat currencies going?
Well, for as long as...
In a minute.
People live near one another, we're going to need governance, and governments are good at governance, and governments should, of course, issue their own tokens. The technology that has been used by nation states to issue currency has evolved, or tribes to issue money has evolved for a long time. Shells and notches on sticks and beads and pieces of paper and rounds of metal and entries in centralized databases. And so we have a better database technology, and of course, nation states are going to use that.
Well, thank you. Well, that's been very interesting. I've certainly learned a lot by listening to you. I hope you and the audience have too. Can I just quickly ask one last question? Based on what you've just heard, does anyone now feel more confident about investing in cryptocurrencies and Ethereum than before?
You did a good job.
Well, I think you're the salesman here. Anyway, thank you very much indeed.
Kim Kardashian affair.
The Kim Kardashian.
The Aspen Institute and the Aspen Ideas Festival have been hosting sitting, past, and future presidents for decades. Whether it was President H.W. Bush in 1990, when he and British Prime Minister came to Aspen for the 40th anniversary of the founding of the Institute, or as a participant in a leadership program like then Senator Barack Obama, or when President Carter visited campus in 2015 as part of one of our lecture series, or in 2016 when now President Biden came and closed out the Ideas Festival.
But our politics is more divided than our people are right now. The difference between when Newt was Speaker and I was in the Senate is that as strongly as we disagreed, we actually talked with one another. We actually trusted each other. We trusted each other when you gave your hand that would be a deal. We used to actually get to know one another.
As a nonpartisan organization, part of our mission is to convene people from both sides of the aisle to get to know each other better and discuss ideas that matter. We would like to thank all of our generous underwriters, the organizations that make this digital festival possible. Each year, the festival is more than just conversation. We have demonstrations and performances and artistic intervention. In that spirit, please welcome to this year's digital festival, Sammy Miller and the congregation.
Here we go. Guess who's back in town? My name is Sammy Miller. We are the congregation. So nice to be here at Aspen Ideas Virtual. 2, skiddle-diddle-doo. In town after our world's turned upside down.
Aspen Ideas is back in town.
Y'all know it, y'all know it.
Come folks gather round.
You can use some glorious sights and sound.
Aspen Ideas is back in.
Pete Buttigieg, well he's in town. Yo Ma. Da-na-na-na-na. Whitney Wolf Herd, Bumble's the word.
Hey.
You got Lonnie Bunch.
Oh yeah!
Tell folks near and far.
Talking, is there life on Mars? Also, is there jazz on Jupiter?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Now I might be naive, but optimism is my creed.
Aspen Ideas is back in.
Come on, Mom.
Aspen Ideas is back in town. Aspen Ideas is back in.
H.R. McMaster with Jeffrey Goldberg. Somebody talking about happiness. They got Jenny's from Jenny's Ice Cream.
I hope they're bringing fluffernutter pie. Fluffernutter pie.
Aspen Ideas Festival is generously underwritten by Allstate, IBM, MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth, Mount Sinai, PayPal, Walton Family Foundation, Verizon, and YouTube. Also, thanks to Prudential and the Rise Fund. And this concludes the 2021 Aspen Ideas Festival. We're so happy you've joined us for these 5 days of conversations. They've been mind-bending and spirit-lifting. They've been astounding and challenging. They've been reassuring, sometimes, and occasionally uncomfortable. If you've come away from these sessions more informed, more energized, more inspired, we'd like to invite you to join us in person in Aspen next year. And if you can't make it to that tent in the meadow, we'll see you right back here. I'm Zinklea Samoa, and it's been my pleasure to be your host. Thank you, and good night.